Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship and watched the stars through the big window. His ship was called the Endeavor, and it was his home among the stars. Jake had been flying between planets for 15 years. He loved exploring, new worlds and meeting different people. Today felt different, though. Today felt wrong. The message had come 3 days ago. All human ships had to return to Earth right away. No one could stay in the outer colonies. No one could explore new planets. The Galactic Council had made their choice. They wanted all humans to leave and never come back. Jake looked at his crew. There was pilot Sam Kelly, who could fly through any asteroid field. There was engineer Mary Johnson, who could fix anything that broke. There was Dr. Paul Adams, who had saved so many lives. These were good people. They did not deserve this. "Captain," said Communications Officer Lisa Grant, "we are getting another message from Admiral Carter." Jake nodded. "Put it on the main screen." Admiral Lisa Carter appeared on the screen. She looked tired and sad. Behind her, Jake could see the busy command center on Earth. People were running around and talking into their devices. Everyone looked worried. "Jake," Admiral Carter said, "how many ships do you have with you?" 12 cargo ships and 4 escort. "Fighters," Jake replied. "We picked up the last families from Mining Station 7 this morning. That was the last human base in this sector." Admiral Carter closed her eyes for a moment. "Good. Bring them home, Jake. We are pulling everyone back. Every ship, every person, every piece of equipment we can carry." "What about the monitoring stations?" Jake asked. "Those old automated systems near the edge of the galaxy. Should we shut them down too?" "No time," Admiral Carter said. "Leave them running. Maybe the Council will take care of them. Maybe they will just shut down on their own. We have bigger problems right now." Jake did not like leaving the monitoring stations behind. His grandfather had helped build some of those systems 50 years ago. They watched the empty space beyond the galaxy. They looked for anything dangerous that might come from outside. Jake's family had always been proud of that work. "Admiral," Jake said, "why are they doing this to us? We never hurt anyone. We helped build hospitals on their worlds. We shared our technology. We fought beside them against the space pirates." Admiral Carter's face looked very sad. "Fear, Jake. They are afraid of us. They say we expand too fast. They say we ask too many questions. They say we go to places where we should not go. The Vorthon leader Zekthar convinced the others that humans are dangerous." On his right, science. Officer Tim Brooks made an angry sound. "Dangerous? We are the ones who found cures for 3 different alien diseases. We are the ones who stopped the asteroid that would have hit their homeworld." "I know, Tim," Admiral Carter said. "But they have made their choice. The vote was final. 4 races voted to expel us. Only the Nexari tried to help us, but they were outvoted." Jake felt anger growing in his chest. "So we just leave? We abandon everything we built out here?" "We have no choice," Admiral Carter said. "They gave us 6 months to leave all contested systems. That time is almost up. If we stay, they will use force. I will not let our people die in a war we cannot win." Jake understood, but he did not like it. He looked at his crew again. They all had the same expression. They felt betrayed and angry and sad all at the same time. "There is something else, Jake," Admiral Carter continued. "When you get back to Earth, you will receive new orders. We are not just going home. We are going beyond. We are going past the edge of the galaxy to places they have never been." "Beyond the rim?" Jake asked. "But there is nothing out there. Just empty space and old dead stars." "Maybe," Admiral Carter said. "Or maybe there are things out there that we need to find, things that we need to understand. The monitoring stations have been picking up strange readings lately, readings that make no sense." Jake felt a chill run down his back. "What kind of readings?" "Energy patterns that should not exist," Admiral Carter said. "Movement in empty space. Signals that seem to come from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. The science teams think it might be related to those old ruins we found on Kepler Station." Jake remembered those ruins. Ancient stone blocks covered in writing that no one could read. The alien archaeologists had said the ruins were millions of years old. They had said the builders were long dead and gone. "Pack everything, Jake," Admiral Carter said. "Every piece of data, every scan, every record, take it all with you. Something tells me we are going to need it." The transmission ended. Jake stood in the quiet of his bridge and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, beyond the edge of the galaxy, they would build new homes. They would start over. They would survive. But Jake could not shake the feeling that the galaxy was making a terrible mistake. The humans had been protecting something important. Now they were leaving. Now no one would be watching the dark spaces between the stars. Jake turned to his crew. "Set course for Earth," he said. "Let's go home." Dr. Elena Rodriguez knelt in the dirt and brushed sand away from the strange stone blocks. She had been digging here for 3 months. The ruins were unlike anything she had ever seen. They were old, older than any civilization in the galaxy. The symbols carved into the stone made her feel cold inside. Elena was on a planet called Haven 7. It was far beyond the edge of the galaxy where humans now lived. 5 years had passed since the Great Expulsion. 5 years since the Galactic. Council had forced all humans to leave their homes and colonies. Now humans lived in the dark space between galaxies, building new cities on cold planets around dying stars. "Dr. Rodriguez," called her assistant, a young man named Danny Parker. "Commander Harris wants to see you. He says it's urgent." Elena stood up and wiped the dirt from her hands. Commander Ben Harris ran the research station on Haven 7. He was a good man who had lost his family during the expulsion. The stress had turned his hair gray, but his eyes were still sharp and smart. Elena walked across the rocky ground to the main building. The station was small but well built. It had laboratories, living quarters, and a communication center that could reach Earth. Outside the building, she could see the strange purple sky of Haven 7. 2 small moons hung low on the horizon. Commander Harris was waiting in his office. He looked worried. On his desk were printouts covered with numbers and graphs. Elena recognized them as energy readings from the monitoring stations. "Elena," Commander Harris said, "we have a problem. A big problem." Elena sat down in the chair across from his desk. "What kind of problem? Remember those old monitoring stations we left behind?" Commander Harris asked. "The ones that watched the edge of the galaxy. They have been sending us automatic reports for 5 years. Until now." Elena felt her stomach tighten. "They stopped working?" 17 of them went dark. "In the last month," Commander Harris said. "These stations were built to run for 100 years without maintenance. They should not be failing this fast." Elena looked at the papers on his desk. "Could the aliens have shut them down?" "No," Commander Harris said. "The aliens don't even know where most of them are. We built them in secret places, hidden in asteroid fields and dead systems. My grandfather helped design some of those systems. They were made to be invisible." Elena picked up one of the reports. The numbers made no sense to her, but she could see the pattern. Energy readings that had been steady for decades were suddenly jumping all over the place. Then they just stopped. "There is something else," Commander Harris said. He turned on his computer screen. "Look at this." The screen showed a map of the galaxy. Red dots marked the locations of the failed monitoring stations. Elena stared at the pattern. The failed stations formed a rough circle around the edge of the galaxy. "It looks like something is moving along the rim," Elena said. "Something that is destroying the stations as it goes." Commander Harris nodded. "That's what I think too. But what could do that? The stations were built to survive almost anything. Solar flares, asteroid impacts, even small wars." Elena thought about the ruins she had been studying. The ancient symbols seemed to tell a story about guardians and watchers, about beings who protected the galaxy from something that lived in the dark spaces between the stars. "Ben," Elena said slowly, "I think we need to look at this differently. What if the monitoring stations were not just watching for alien invasions? What if they were watching for something else? Like what? Elena stood up and walked to the window. Outside, she could see the excavation site where she had been working. The ancient ruins looked dark and mysterious in the purple light. I have been studying those ruins for months, Elena said. The symbols tell a story. They talk about guardians who watch the threshold between light and darkness. They talk about things that sleep in the void between galaxies. Commander Harris was quiet for a moment. You think those old stories are real? I think our ancestors knew something we forgot, Elena said. I think they built those monitoring stations for a reason. And now that we are gone, no one is watching. Back in the galaxy, young Vorthon scientist Kylthon stared at his computer screen in confusion. The energy readings made no sense. His instruments were detecting movement in empty space near the galactic rim. Movement where nothing should exist. Kylthon was only 23 years old. He had grown up after the human expulsion. He had been taught that humans were dangerous and unpredictable. But lately, he was starting to wonder if his elders had made a mistake. The humans had left behind many scientific papers and research notes. Kylthon had been reading them in secret. The human scientists had theories about dimensional barriers and parallel universes. They had ideas that his own people had never considered. Kylthon called his supervisor, an older Vorthon named Rexkar. What are you working on? Energy anomalies near Sector 7, Kylthon said. The readings are very strange. They show patterns that should not exist in normal space. Rexkar looked at the screen, his yellow eyes narrowed. Probably just equipment. Malfunction. Those sensors are old. Have the maintenance team check them. I already did, Kylthon said. The equipment is working fine. The readings are real. Rexkar made an annoyed sound. Then it is probably just solar wind or cosmic radiation. Nothing to worry about. But Kylthon was worried. He had found old human research papers that talked about these exact kinds of readings. The humans had called them threshold echoes. They had theorized that such readings might indicate weakness in the barriers between dimensions. That night, Kylthon worked alone in his laboratory. He accessed the old human database that his government had forbidden anyone to read. The password had been easy to crack. Humans always used simple passwords like the names of their pets or their favorite foods. The human research was fascinating and terrifying at the same time. They had found evidence of an ancient race that had built monitoring systems around the galaxy. This race had called themselves the Watchers of the Threshold. They had protected the galaxy from something they called the Devourers. According to the human research, the Devourers were beings from another dimension. They fed on matter and energy from normal space. They came through weak points in the barriers between dimensions. The Watchers had built monitoring stations to detect these weak points and strengthen the barriers. Kylthon felt a chill run through his scales. If the human research was correct, then the monitoring stations around the galactic rim were not just watching for invasions. They were protecting the entire galaxy from interdimensional predators, and now many of those stations had gone silent. Kylthon looked at his latest readings again. The energy patterns were getting stronger. Whatever was causing them was getting closer to normal space. He needed to contact someone, but who would believe him? His own people thought humans were paranoid and superstitious. Maybe he could contact the humans directly. They might still be listening to transmissions from the galaxy. They might know what to do. Kylthon began composing a message. He hoped the humans would forgive his people for their mistake. He hoped it was not already too late. Ryan Clark floated in the darkness between two asteroids and watched the alien ships through his telescope. He had been hiding here for 6 hours. His small scout ship was powered down and cold. The aliens could not detect him, but he could see everything they were doing. Ryan was a spy. For 7 years, he had been sneaking into the galaxy to gather information for the human government in exile. He had watched alien colonies and listened to their communications. He had learned their languages and studied their technology. Today, he was watching something that made his blood run cold. The alien ships were investigating the wreckage of a cargo vessel. The ship had been torn apart, but not by weapons or explosions. Something had pulled it apart from the inside. The metal, was twisted into impossible shapes. Strange geometric patterns were carved into the hull. Ryan activated his recording equipment and began documenting what he saw. Through his earpiece, he could hear the alien communications. They were speaking in Vorthon, a language he knew well. "The crew is gone," said one voice. "No bodies, no blood, nothing. It is like they just vanished." "The cargo bay is empty too," said another voice. "But the cargo doors are still sealed. How did everything disappear?" Ryan zoomed in on the wreckage with his telescope. The geometric patterns looked familiar. He had seen similar patterns in the ruins that Dr. Rodriguez was studying, but these patterns were burned into the metal, as if something had written them with pure energy. "Captain," said a third voice over the radio, "you need to see this. We found something in the engine room." Ryan watched as the alien ships moved closer to the wreckage. Through his telescope, he could see alien crew members in spacesuits floating around the destroyed ship. They were all keeping their distance from something in the rear section. "What is that thing?" asked the captain. "We don't know," came the reply. "It looks like a hole in space, but it's not a hole. It's something else. Something that hurts to look at." Ryan felt his hands shake as he adjusted his telescope. In the engine room of the destroyed ship, he could see what the aliens were talking about. It was a dark spot that seemed to bend light around it. Looking at it made his eyes water and his head hurt. This was the fourth ship that had been found like this in the past month. Always the same pattern. The crew vanishing, the cargo disappearing, and those strange geometric patterns burned into the hull. The aliens were starting to panic. Ryan finished recording and powered up his ship's engines. He needed to get this information back to the human colonies. He needed to warn them that something was wrong in the galaxy. Something was hunting in the dark spaces between the stars. 3 days later, Ryan sat in a meeting room on Haven 7 with Commander Harris and Dr. Rodriguez. His recordings were playing on the main screen. The room was quiet, except for the sound of alien voices speaking in fear. "This is the fourth incident," Ryan said. "Always the same pattern. Ships torn apart from the inside, crews vanishing, and those geometric patterns burned into the metal." "Doctor," Rodriguez leaned forward in her chair, "the patterns match what I found in the ruins. But these are fresh. Something is making new patterns." Commander Harris studied the images on the screen. "Any idea what we are dealing with?" "I have a theory," Dr. Rodriguez said. "But you are not going to like it." She stood up and walked to the whiteboard. With a marker, she began drawing symbols that looked like the ones from the ruins and the shipwreckage. "The ancient texts talk about beings called devourers," she said. "They come from another dimension. They feed on matter and energy from our universe. The texts say they appear as holes in space that bend light and consume everything around them." Ryan felt his stomach drop. "The thing I saw in the engine room, it looked exactly like that. The texts also say the devourers leave marks when they feed," Dr. Rodriguez continued. "Geometric patterns that serve as anchors between dimensions. The more they feed, the stronger the anchors become." Commander Harris was quiet for a moment. "You are saying that something from another dimension is eating ships and crews?" "I think so," Dr. Rodriguez said. "And I think the monitoring stations we left behind were designed to prevent this. They were not just watching for alien invasions. They were strengthening the barriers between dimensions." Ryan remembered the energy readings that Commander Harris had shown him. 17 monitoring stations had gone dark in the past month, the same month that ships had started disappearing. "We need to contact Earth," Ryan said. "The government needs to know about this." "I already tried," Commander Harris said. "But Earth is 3 months away by the fastest ships. Even if we sent a message at light speed, it would take weeks to reach them." Dr. Rodriguez walked back to her chair. "There might be another option. We could try to contact the aliens directly. Warn them about what's happening." Ryan laughed, but there was no humor in it. "They expelled us from the galaxy. They told us never to come back. Why would they listen to us now?" "Because they are in danger," Dr. Rodriguez said. "Because the things that are hunting them don't care about politics or species boundaries. The devourers will consume everything if they are not stopped. Meanwhile, in the galaxy, young scientist Kyle Thon was having the same realization. He had been monitoring the disappearances and trying to make sense of the energy readings. The patterns matched the old human research exactly. Kylethon had tried to warn his superiors, but they dismissed his concerns. They said the human research was unreliable. They said humans were prone to paranoid fantasies, but the evidence was right there in front of them. 3 more ships had disappeared in the past week. The geometric patterns were appearing on asteroids and space stations. Whatever was causing this was getting stronger and bolder. Kylethon made a decision that would change his life forever. He accessed the human communication frequencies and began transmitting a message into the dark space beyond the galaxy. "This is Kylethon of the Vorthon Science Institute," he broadcast. "I am calling any humans who might be listening. We need your help. Something is wrong in the galaxy. Ships are disappearing. Strange patterns are appearing everywhere. The readings match your old research about dimensional barriers and threshold echoes." Kylethon paused, wondering if anyone was listening. Then he continued. "I think my people made a mistake when they expelled you. I think you were protecting us from something we did not understand. Please, if anyone is listening, we need to know what these patterns mean. We need to know how to stop whatever is doing this." The message traveled out into the darkness between galaxies. Kylethon could only hope that someone would hear it and respond. He could only hope that the humans would forgive his people for their arrogance, because if they didn't, everyone in the galaxy might pay the price for that arrogance with their lives. General Alex Thompson stood in the command center of the human fleet and watched the reports coming in from the galaxy. Each message was worse than the last. Entire star systems were going dark. Colonies that had existed for thousands of years were simply vanishing. The geometric patterns were appearing everywhere, burned into planets and moons like cosmic graffiti. Alex was 55 years old and had spent most of his life in the military. He had fought pirates and rebels and alien raiders. But he had never seen anything like this. This was not war. This was something far worse. "General," said his aide, Lieutenant Kate Wilson, "we just received another transmission from the galaxy. A luminary distress call from the Andara system." Alex nodded. "Put it on the main screen." The image that appeared made everyone in the command center go silent. It showed the space around a beautiful blue-green planet. But the space was wrong. Reality itself seemed to be tearing apart. Massive holes in the fabric of space-time were opening and closing like hungry mouths. Through these holes, dark shapes were pouring into normal space. The shapes were hard to look at. They bent light around them and made the air itself seem to scream. They moved with purpose and intelligence, spreading out across the system like a disease. Wherever they touched, matter simply ceased to exist. "My name is Captain Velkanis of the Luminary Defense Force," said a voice over the transmission. "Our system is under attack by unknown entities. They came through dimensional rifts that opened without warning. Our weapons have no effect on them. They are consuming our planets and our people." Alex watched in horror as one of the dark entities surrounded a space station. The station folded in on itself and disappeared, leaving only twisted geometric patterns floating in space. "We are evacuating what we can," Captain Velkanis continued. "But there is nowhere to run. The entities are spreading to other systems. They are consuming everything in their path. If anyone receives this message, stay away from the galactic core. Stay away from anywhere the patterns appear." The transmission ended in static. Alex closed his eyes and tried to process what he had just seen. These were the devourers that Dr. Rodriguez had warned about, the ancient enemy that the monitoring stations had been designed to contain. "General," said Dr. Kevin Walsh, the fleet's chief scientist, "I have been analyzing the transmissions from the galaxy. The entities appear to be feeding on matter and energy to strengthen their dimensional anchors. Each feeding makes it easier for more of them to cross over." Alex opened his eyes. "How many are we talking about?" "Based on the rate of spread, I estimate thousands have already crossed over," Dr. Walsh said. "And the number is growing exponentially. If this continues, they could consume the entire galaxy within months." Alex felt the weight of command settling on his shoulders. The human exile fleet consisted of 200 ships and 3 million people. They were outnumbered 1,000,000 to 1 by the alien civilizations in the galaxy, but those same civilizations were now being devoured by an enemy they could not fight. "Sir," said Communications Officer Dan Foster, "we are receiving a priority message from President Mitchell on Earth." Alex nodded. "Put her through." President Claire Mitchell appeared on the screen. She was a strong woman in her 60s who had led the human government through the dark years of exile. Behind her, Alex could see the busy halls of the emergency. "Command Center on Earth." "Alex," President Mitchell said, "I assume you have seen the reports from the galaxy." "Yes, Madam President. The situation is beyond critical. The alien civilizations are being systematically exterminated." President Mitchell was quiet for a moment. "The irony is not lost on me, Alex. They expelled us to protect themselves from what they saw as a threat. Now they face a threat that makes our worst nightmares look like children's games. Are we going to help them?" Alex asked. "That depends," President Mitchell said. "Dr. Walsh, are you there?" Dr. Walsh stepped forward. "Yes, Madam President." "Tell me about these devourers. Can they be stopped?" Dr. Walsh looked uncomfortable. "Based on the ancient texts and our observations, they feed on normal matter and energy. But they appear to be vulnerable to specific types of neural interference. The human brain produces electrical patterns that disrupt their feeding process." "Are you saying that humans are immune to these things?" "Not immune," Dr. Walsh said, "but resistant. Our neural patterns seem to cause them pain or confusion. It might be enough to drive them back to their own dimension." President Mitchell leaned forward. "How many humans would it take?" "I don't know," Dr. Walsh admitted. "The ancient texts are unclear, but it would require direct exposure to the entities. It would be extremely dangerous." Alex understood what the president was thinking. "You want to take the fleet into the galaxy. You want to fight these things." "I want to save everyone," President Mitchell said, "human and alien alike, but I won't order anyone to go on a suicide mission. This has to be voluntary." Alex looked around the command center at his crew. These people had followed him through 7 years of exile. They had lost their homes and their families because of alien prejudice. They had every reason to let the galaxy burn, but Alex knew his people. He knew they would not stand by and watch innocent beings suffer, even if those beings had wronged them. That was what made humans different. That was what made them special. "Madam President," Alex said, "I volunteer to take the fleet into the galaxy. We will do whatever it takes to stop these devourers." President Mitchell smiled sadly. "I thought you might say that. Alex, I am promoting you to Admiral and giving you full authority over this mission. Take the fleet and save the galaxy. Save everyone you can." The transmission ended. Alex turned to face his crew. They were all looking at him with expressions of determination and fear. They knew what he was going to ask of them. "You heard the president," Alex said. "We are going back to the galaxy. We are going to fight an enemy that exists outside normal space and time. We are going to try to save the same people who expelled us from our homes." Lieutenant Wilson raised her hand. "Admiral, what if we can't win? What if we all die trying?" Alex thought about that for a moment. "Then we die knowing we tried to do the right thing. We die knowing we stood up to the darkness when no one else could." Dr. Walsh stepped forward. "Admiral, there is something else. I have been studying the neural patterns of the crew. Some humans seem to produce stronger interference fields than others. We might be able to amplify the effect with the right technology." "Do it," Alex said. "Work with the engineering teams. Build whatever you need. We have 3 weeks to prepare before we reach the galaxy." As his crew rushed to their stations, Alex looked out at the stars through the command center windows. Somewhere, in that darkness, an ancient evil was consuming entire civilizations. The humans had been cast out and forgotten. But now, they were the galaxy's only hope. Alex smiled grimly. The aliens had driven the humans away to protect themselves. Now they would learn that the humans had been protecting them all along. The consequences of that arrogance were about to arrive. And those consequences had a name. They were called humanity. Admiral Frank Newton watched the massive human fleet drop out of hyperspace at the edge of the galaxy. 200 ships spread out in perfect formation, their weapons powered and their shields raised. Frank had served under Admiral Thompson, until the older man's sacrifice at the Battle of Kepler Station. Now Frank carried the weight of command and the hopes of two species. The galaxy looked different from when humans had been forced to leave. Dark patches spread across whole sectors where stars had been consumed. The beautiful spiral arms were broken by geometric scars that hurt to look at. This was not the galaxy they had called home. This was a galaxy under siege. "Admiral," said his communications officer, Tony Richards, "we are receiving multiple distress signals. Looks like survivors from at least 50 different systems." Frank nodded. "Open a channel to all human ships. It's time to address the fleet." The main screen switched to show the bridge of Frank's flagship. Frank stood tall in his blue uniform, his gray hair neat despite the stress of the past weeks. Behind him, his crew worked at their stations with quiet efficiency. "People of the human fleet," Frank began. 9 years ago, we were driven from this galaxy. We were told we were dangerous. We were told we didn't belong here. Today, we return not as conquerors, but as protectors. Today, we return to save everyone who once called us enemy." Frank paused and looked at the tactical display. Red warning lights marked the positions of Devourer attacks across the galaxy. Entire civilizations were crying out for help. "The enemy we face is unlike anything in our experience," Frank continued. "They are beings from another dimension who feed on matter and energy from our universe. They cannot be reasoned with or negotiated with. They exist only to consume. But we have learned something important about them. They fear the human mind." On the bridge of the science vessel Discovery, Dr. Amy Foster checked her dimensional anchor. Equipment 1, last time. She had been working for months to develop technology that could seal the rifts between dimensions. The theory was sound, but it required a human neural network to operate. It required volunteers willing to link their minds directly to the anchor systems. Dr. Foster called her assistant, engineer Mike Roberts. "The neural interface pods are ready. We can link up to 20 volunteers at a time." Amy looked at the pods with a mixture of hope and fear. Each pod contained advanced neural monitoring equipment and a direct connection to the dimensional anchor systems. The volunteers would experience the full force of the Devourer's dimensional presence. Many of them might not survive. "How many people have volunteered?" Amy asked. "Over 300, Mike said. "More are signing up every hour. Word is spreading through the fleet that we need neural volunteers." Amy felt tears forming in her eyes. These people had already lost everything because of alien prejudice. Now they were willing to risk their lives to save those same aliens. It was the most human thing she had ever witnessed. Meanwhile, in the galaxy, the surviving alien forces were struggling to mount any kind of resistance. The Devourers consumed weapons and shields as easily as they consumed planets. Traditional, military tactics were useless against an enemy that existed partially outside normal space. High Arbiter Velnari of the Luminari floated in her escape pod and watched her homeworld die. The beautiful crystal cities that had taken millennia to build were folding in on themselves as the Devourers fed. Her people's songs of light and harmony were being silenced forever. "Any word from the other evacuation fleets?" she asked her. "Aid through the pod's communication system." "Negative, High Arbiter. We lost contact with the Vorthan fleet 6 hours ago. The Nexari defensive line collapsed this morning. We are on our own." Velnari closed her eyes and tried to find some measure of peace in her mind. The Luminari were an ancient race. They had survived wars and disasters and cosmic catastrophes, but this was different. This was extinction. "High Arbiter," her aide said suddenly. "I am detecting ships at the edge of the system. Multiple contacts, unknown configuration." Velnari opened her eyes and looked at the sensor readings. The ships were definitely not Devourer constructs. They were metal and plastic and ceramic, built by beings who understood physics and engineering. But the design was unfamiliar. "Can you identify them?" she asked. "Running analysis now," her aide said. Wait, this is impossible. The computer says these are human ships, but humans were expelled from the galaxy 9 years ago. Velnari felt something she had not felt in months. Hope. On the bridge of Admiral Newton's flagship, Tony Richards was coordinating rescue operations across multiple star systems. His Special Forces teams were evacuating survivors and fighting rearguard actions against the Devourers. It was dangerous work, but the humans seemed to have a natural advantage. "Admiral," Tony said, "Team 7 just extracted 2,000 Nexari, refugees from the Bellin system. Team 3 is engaging Devourer constructs near the Vorthan mining colony. They report that the entities retreat when faced with concentrated human neural activity." Admiral Newton studied the tactical display. The human advantage was real but limited. Individual humans could disrupt Devourer feeding patterns, but they could not close the dimensional rifts. For that, they needed Dr. Foster's dimensional anchor technology. "Any word from Dr. Foster?" Frank asked. "She reports that the first neural network test was successful," Tony said. 20 volunteers linked their minds to the anchor system and managed to destabilize a small dimensional rift. But the process was extremely taxing. 3 volunteers are in critical condition. Frank felt the weight of command pressing down on him. Every decision he made would determine who lived and who died. Every strategy could save thousands or doom them all. "Tony, contact all team leaders. Tell them we are implementing Operation Guardian. All human forces will converge on the galactic core where the largest dimensional rift is located. If we can close that rift, we might be able to cut off the Devourer's primary access point." "Sir," Tony said, "intelligence reports indicate that over 1 million Devourer entities have already crossed over. Even if we close the main rift, the ones already here will continue feeding. Then we deal with them one at a time," Frank said. "We use our neural advantage to drive them back to their own dimension. It won't be easy, but it's the only chance we have." Across the galaxy, word spread among the surviving alien populations that the humans had returned. Some welcomed them as saviors, others remained suspicious even in the face of extinction. But slowly, gradually, a desperate alliance began to form. Young Kilthan had survived the destruction of his homeworld and was now serving as a liaison between human and Vorthan forces. He translated communications and helped coordinate rescue operations. He had become a bridge between two species that had once been enemies. "The humans are not what we were told," Kilthan explained to a group of Vorthan refugees. "They are not aggressive or expansionist. They are protectors. They have come to save us from our own mistakes." Elder Zekthar, the Vorthan leader who had originally pushed for human expulsion, lay dying in a makeshift hospital. His body was failing, consumed by guilt and the stress of watching his civilization crumble. "I was wrong," Zekthar whispered to Kilthan. "I feared the humans because they asked questions we were not ready to answer. I feared them because they explored places we were afraid to go. But they were exploring those places to protect us. They were asking those questions to keep us safe." Kilthan held the old leader's hand as he died. It was a moment of redemption and regret, of understanding that came too late for millions of beings who had already been consumed. But it was not too late for everyone. The humans had returned, and with them came hope. The alliance between human and alien was fragile and desperate, but it was real. Together, they would make their stand against the darkness. Together, they would face the consequences of arrogance and fear. And together, they would discover what it truly meant to be guardians of the galaxy. Admiral Frank Newton stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the largest space battle in galactic history unfold before him. The combined human and alien fleet stretched across 3 star systems. 200 human ships flew alongside. 500 alien vessels of every design and configuration. They were all converging on the galactic core where the primary dimensional rift pulsed like a wound in reality itself. The rift was massive, spanning several light years, and growing, larger every hour. Through it, Frank could see the twisted geometries of the Devourer dimension. Dark entities poured through the opening in endless streams, spreading out to consume everything in their path. This was the source. This was where it would all end, one way or another. "Admiral," said Tony Richards, "Dr. Foster reports that her dimensional anchor is ready. She has 400 volunteers linked to the neural network. They are standing by for your order." Frank looked at the tactical display. The Devourer forces were enormous. Millions of entities swarmed around the rift, forming geometric patterns that hurt to look at. The combined fleet would be outnumbered 1,000 to 1. "Open a channel to President Mitchell," Frank said. President Claire Mitchell appeared on the main screen. She was aboard the command ship New Earth, which carried the most advanced dimensional anchor equipment. Her face showed the strain of the past weeks, but her eyes were determined. "Frank," she said, "are you ready?" "As ready as we can be," Frank replied. "But I have to tell you, the odds are not good. Even with our neural advantage, there are too many of them. We might not all make it back." President Mitchell smiled sadly. "Frank, 9 years ago we were driven from our homes because people feared what we might become. Today, we have the chance to show them what we really are. We are protectors. We are guardians. We are the ones who stand between the innocent and the darkness." Frank nodded. "Understood, Madam President. All ships. This is Admiral Newton. Today we fight not for conquest or revenge. We fight for every living being in this galaxy. We fight for the future itself." The battle began with a coordinated assault on the Devourer formations around the dimensional rift. Human ships led the charge, their crews projecting neural interference fields that disrupted the entity's feeding patterns. The Devourers recoiled from the human presence like animals fleeing fire. Behind the human ships came the alien vessels. Vorthon battle cruisers fired quantum torpedoes, while Luminari song ships projected harmonics that weakened the dimensional barriers. Nexari crystal ships channeled pure energy into focused beams that carved through Devourer constructs. Dr. Amy Foster worked frantically in her laboratory aboard the science vessel Discovery. The dimensional anchor was the most complex piece of technology ever built by human science. It required 400 human minds working in perfect harmony to generate the neural field necessary to seal the primary rift. Dr. Foster called her assistant, Mike Roberts. "Neural network is at full power. All volunteers are connected and stable." Amy looked at the monitors showing the vital signs of the volunteers. Men and women from every human colony had stepped forward to link their minds to the anchor system. They were experiencing the full psychic weight of the dimensional rift, feeling the alien geometries and impossible mathematics of the Devourer realm. "Begin the sealing process," Amy said. "Slowly. If we push too hard too fast, we could lose." Volunteers to neural shock. The dimensional anchor began to work. Reality around the rift started to stabilize as the human neural network imposed order on the chaos. The geometric patterns that marked dimensional weakness began to fade. The rift itself started to shrink, but the Devourers fought back. Sensing the threat to their primary access point, they abandoned their feeding operations across the galaxy and converged on the battle zone. Millions of entities swarmed toward the combined fleet like a tide of living darkness. "All ships, concentrate. Fire on the primary swarm," Frank ordered. "Protect the anchor ship at all costs." The battle became a desperate fighting retreat as the human and alien forces tried to buy time for Dr. Foster's work. Ships disappeared into geometric folds as the Devourers consumed them. Others were torn apart by forces that existed outside. Normal physics. President Mitchell made the hardest decision of her life. She ordered her ship to ram directly into the largest concentration of Devourer entities. The New Earth's nuclear reactors overloaded in a brilliant explosion that disrupted thousands of the creatures. President Mitchell and her crew were lost, but their sacrifice created a gap in the enemy formation. "Madam President is gone," Tony said quietly. "The New Earth has been destroyed." Frank felt tears forming in his eyes. Claire Mitchell had led humanity through its darkest hours. She had brought them home to save the galaxy that had rejected them. Her sacrifice would not be forgotten. "Continue the mission," Frank said. Seal that rift. Dr. Foster pushed the dimensional anchor to its limits. The neural network was straining under the psychic pressure, but the volunteers held on. The rift continued to shrink as reality reasserted itself around the tear in space-time. Neural network is destabilizing, Mike Roberts warned. We are losing volunteers to neural shock. If this continues, the whole system could collapse. Amy made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. She disconnected the safety protocols and pushed the anchor system beyond its design limits. The neural field intensified dramatically, causing the dimensional rift to collapse faster than ever before. But the cost was terrible. Dozens of volunteers went into neural shock as their minds were overwhelmed by alien geometries. Others fell into comas from which they might never wake. Amy watched good people sacrifice their sanity to save the galaxy. Rift is destabilizing, she reported. Dimensional barriers are strengthening. The primary access point is closing. Across the battle zone, the remaining devourer entities began to fade as their connection to their home dimension weakened. Those that remained in normal space found themselves cut off from their feeding source. Without constant dimensional energy, they could not maintain their existence in normal reality. The battle was won, but at a devastating cost. Half the human fleet was gone. Thousands of volunteers had sacrificed their minds to operate the dimensional anchor. President Mitchell and countless others had given their lives to protect beings who had once called them enemies. Frank stood in the ruins of his command center and surveyed the aftermath. The primary dimensional rift was sealed, but smaller rifts remained scattered across the galaxy. It would take years to close them all. It would take decades to rebuild what had been lost. Admiral, said Kyle Than, the young Vorthon scientist who had first warned them about the crisis. My people want to thank you. We know we do not deserve your help. We know we wronged you terribly. Frank looked at the alien who had become a friend and ally. Kyle Than, we did not come back for your thanks. We came back because it was the right thing to do. Still, Kyle Than said, we owe you a debt that can never be repaid. We drove you away when you were protecting us. We called you dangerous when you were our guardians. Frank was quiet for a moment. The galaxy has learned a hard lesson about the price of fear and prejudice. I hope it's a lesson that won't be forgotten. In the years that followed, a new galactic council was formed with humans as permanent members. The old monitoring stations were rebuilt and staffed with volunteers from every species. The dimensional anchor technology was shared freely so that future incursions could be stopped before they began. Memorial stations were established at the sites of the old human colonies. Plaques honored the humans who had died protecting people, who had rejected them. Schools taught children about the importance of unity and understanding between different species. Dr. Amy Foster spent the rest of her career developing treatments for the volunteers who had sacrificed their mental health. To save the galaxy, many recovered fully. Others lived with permanent damage from their exposure to alien dimensions. All were honored as heroes who had stood against the darkness. Frank Newton retired to a small colony world where humans and aliens lived together in peace. He tended a garden and wrote memoirs about the war against the devourers. Children of every species came to hear his stories about courage and sacrifice and the power of forgiveness. The galaxy had learned that diversity was not a weakness, but a strength. They had learned that the beings they feared and rejected might be the very ones destined to save them. They had learned that arrogance and prejudice carried a price that could destroy civilizations. Most importantly, they had learned that when darkness threatened to consume everything, it was not the strongest or the most advanced who stood against it. It was those with the courage to do what was right, regardless of the cost. It was the guardians who watched, the threshold between light and darkness, keeping the universe safe for all who dwelt within it. The humans had been driven away, and the consequences had indeed arrived. But those consequences were not what anyone had expected. They were hope, redemption, and the unshakable knowledge that no one stands alone against the dark as long as there are guardians willing to answer the call.